I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when I looked out the window and saw three strangers in matching green polo shirts tearing across my front lawn with industrial mowers, leaving uneven tracks through grass I had specifically been letting grow out for native wildflowers. My heart hammered as I watched them destroy weeks of careful planning without so much as knocking on my door first. I ran outside in my bare feet, nearly tripping over the front step. The roar of the mowers drowned out my first attempt to yell, so I had to sprint directly into their path, waving my arms like a madman until the nearest worker finally noticed me and shut off his machine. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, gesturing at the butchered patches of what used to be a carefully curated meadow starter kit. The worker, a tired-looking guy in his 20s, just shrugged and pointed to an older man near the truck. I stomped over, feeling the cut grass sticking to my feet, each step making me angrier. "Who authorized you to touch my property?" I demanded. The older man pulled out a work order on a clipboard. "HOA request. We got called in this morning for 2247 Meadowbrook Lane, Henderson, Nevada. That's this address. I didn't request anything. This is my house and I specifically want my lawn like this." He scratched his head, looking uncomfortable. "Look, man, we just do what the HOA tells us. They said the grass was too long, violated some code. We have to mow it or they don't pay us. Stop right now. Don't touch anything else." The man hesitated, then nodded to his crew. The mowers died one by one, leaving an eerie silence in the suburban morning. My lawn looked like a war zone, half wild meadow and half scalped to within an inch of the soil. I stormed back inside and grabbed my phone. The Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association had been a thorn in my side since I moved in 6 months ago, but this crossed every line imaginable. I found the number for Patricia Hendrickson, the HOA president, and called immediately. It rang 4 times before she answered with that syrupy sweet voice that made my teeth hurt. "Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, Patricia speaking." "Patricia, this is Marcus Dalton from 2247 Meadowbrook Lane. Why are there people mowing my lawn without my permission?" "Oh, Marcus." Her tone shifted to that condescending lilt that suggested she was smiling. "We sent you 3 notices about your lawn exceeding the maximum height requirements. When you didn't respond, we had to take action per the HOA guidelines, Section 12, Paragraph 4. I never got any notices. And I'm growing native plants deliberately. It's for pollinators, which I'm allowed to do. I'm afraid natural landscaping requires pre-approval from the Architectural Review Committee. You never submitted the proper forms. The lawn work is being done for the good of the community, and you'll receive an invoice for the service plus administrative fees within 5 business days. My grip on the phone tightened. You can't just bill me for something I didn't authorize. Actually, per your HOA agreement, we can. It's all in the bylaws you signed when you purchased the property. Have a wonderful day, Marcus. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, rage bubbling up from my stomach. I'd read those bylaws when I bought the house, and while they were extensive and ridiculous, I didn't remember anything giving them carte blanche to invade my property and charge me for it. I pulled up the PDF of the HOA agreement on my laptop and started reading. Section 12 was about property maintenance. Paragraph 4 stated that grass couldn't exceed 6 inches in height, and if a homeowner didn't maintain their property after written notice, the HOA could arrange services and bill the homeowner. The key words were written notice. I'd checked my mail religiously and there had been nothing. I went to my filing cabinet where I kept every piece of mail, even junk, for exactly this reason. No HOA notices. Nothing. I called Patricia back. This time she let it go to voicemail. I left a message explaining I never received notices and demanding proof of delivery. Outside, the lawn crew had packed up and left, abandoning the job half-finished. My front yard looked absurd, like someone had given up mid-haircut. I took dozens of photos from every angle, documenting the damage. My phone rang an hour later. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Mr. Dalton, this is Patricia Hendrickson. I'm calling from my personal line because this matter has become quite serious." "You're right about that. Your hostile attitude is noted. I'm calling to inform you that the lawn service will return tomorrow to complete the work. Additionally, your account now shows an outstanding balance of $475. This includes the mowing service, an administrative fee, and a fine for letting the violation persist for 3 weeks. Patricia, I never got any notices. I want proof you sent them. We sent them certified mail standard procedure. If you didn't receive them, that's a postal issue, not an HOA issue. Then you'll have the tracking numbers and delivery confirmations. Send them to me." There was a pause. "I'll have our secretary look into that. I'll wait. It may take a few days." "That's fine. Until I see proof, I'm not paying anything, and if that lawn crew comes back, I'm calling the police for trespassing." Her voice went cold. "Mr. Dalton, I strongly advise against making threats. The HOA has legal authority to maintain community standards. Interfering with that is a violation of your agreement and could result in liens against your property. And invading someone's property without proper notice is illegal, so I guess we're at an impasse." I hung up, my hands shaking. I'd never been confrontational by nature. I'd moved to Henderson for a quiet life, a fresh start after my divorce. I worked remotely as a software developer, kept to myself, and just wanted to be left alone. The native plant lawn had been my one act of minor rebellion, a way to do something good for the environment in my own small space. Now, I was in a war with a homeowners association. I spent the rest of the day researching Nevada HOA law. It turned out that HOAs did have significant power, but it wasn't unlimited. They had to follow their own bylaws, provide proper notice, and homeowners had the right to challenge fines and fees through internal appeals and, if necessary, court. I drafted a formal letter to the HOA board requesting an appeal hearing, copies of all alleged notices, and proof of delivery. I sent it via email and certified mail, creating my own paper trail. The next morning, I woke up at 6 to make sure I'd catch the lawn crew if they returned. Sure enough, at 7:30, the same green truck pulled up. I was outside before they even unloaded the mowers. "I told your boss yesterday, you're not touching this lawn." The older man from before stepped out looking even more tired. "Look, buddy, I got bills to pay. The HOA hired us for a job, and I'm the property owner telling you no. If you proceed, it's trespassing and I will call the police." He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled out his phone and walked away, talking in low tones. After 5 minutes, he came back. "HOA lady says we have the right to complete the work." "The HOA lady doesn't own this property." "I do." I held up my phone. "Police are 1 call away." The standoff lasted another minute before he threw up his hands. "Fine. I'm not getting arrested for this. We'll tell them you refused access." He and his crew loaded back up and drove away. I felt a small surge of victory, but it was short-lived. 20 minutes later, Patricia herself arrived in a silver BMW, her highlighted blonde hair perfect, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. She marched up my driveway in heels that clicked against the concrete. "Mr. Dalton, this is unacceptable. You're on my property uninvited." "That's what's unacceptable. You are in violation of community standards and preventing the HOA from enforcing those standards." Show me the notices you claim you sent. Her jaw tightened. I don't carry those documents with me. Then email them. You have my address. This is bigger than some paperwork, Marcus. This is about community standards. When you bought here, you agreed to maintain your property in a way that upholds our neighborhood values. Your lawn is an eyesore. It's a pollinator habitat. Bees, butterflies, native insects. Things that are dying because of lawns exactly like what you're trying to force me to have. I don't care about your bees. I care about property values. And I care about my rights as a property owner. You don't get to just invade my space because you don't like how my grass looks. Patricia stepped closer, her voice dropping. You're making a big mistake. The HOA has resources you don't. We have lawyers on retainer. We can make your life very difficult. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The invoice for the lawn service is going to stand. If you don't pay within 30 days, we'll file a lien against your house. Keep being difficult, and we'll find other violations. I guarantee you're not in perfect compliance with every single rule in our bylaws. She turned and walked back to her car, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding. I went inside and immediately contacted a real estate attorney named David Chen, whose website specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in Las Vegas, about 20 minutes from Henderson. I explained the situation, and he agreed to meet the next day. David's office was in a modest building off the strip. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes and an easy manner. I laid out everything while he took notes. Okay, he said when I finished. First question, did you get the certified mail notices? No, nothing. And you checked with the post office? Not yet. Do that today. If they have records of attempted delivery, that changes things. If they don't, or if the HOA never actually sent them, then they violated their own procedures. What about them billing me for a service I didn't approve? That's where it gets tricky. HOAs do have the power to maintain properties and bill owners if they're truly in violation after proper notice. But proper notice is key. Without it, they're on shaky ground. Can they really put a lien on my house? If you owe them money per the HOA agreement, yes, eventually. But there's a process. You have the right to a hearing to dispute the charges, and if they violated procedure, you have a strong case to get the charges dismissed. What should I do? David leaned back. Request that hearing immediately if you haven't already. Collect every piece of evidence you can. Photos of your lawn, the lack of notices, everything. I'll draft a letter making it clear you're represented by counsel and that you're disputing all charges. That usually makes HOAs more careful because they know you're serious. Will this cost me a fortune? He smiled. I'll be honest with you, HOA cases can drag on, but I've seen enough of these to know when an HOA is overstepping. If they truly didn't send proper notice, I can probably get them to back down with a few letters. Let's start there, see how they respond. My retainer is $1,500, and we'll work from there. It was money I hadn't planned to spend, but I didn't see another choice. I paid the retainer, and David promised to have a letter to the HOA by end of business. I stopped at the post office on the way home. The clerk checked the records for my address. No certified mail deliveries in the past month. No attempted deliveries either. Could someone have sent certified mail without it showing up in your system? I asked. Not if they actually mailed it. Every certified letter gets tracked. If it's not in the system, it wasn't sent, or it was sent to the wrong address. I got a printed statement confirming no certified mail deliveries to my address. More evidence. That evening, I got an email from the HOA. It was from their secretary, a woman named Linda, with attachments. Per your request, please find copies of the notices sent to your address. I opened the attachments. 3 letters dated over the past 3 weeks, each informing me my lawn was in violation and needed to be cut. They looked official with dates, reference numbers, everything. But they were just PDFs. No proof they'd actually been sent. I forwarded them to David with a note. They sent me copies of letters but no proof of mailing. He responded within an hour. Perfect. This is exactly what I expected. They can create documents after the fact, but without postal records it means nothing. Sit tight. The next day David's letter went out. I got a copy by email. It was formal and firm, laying out my position, demanding proof of proper notice with postal tracking numbers, and stating that all charges were disputed pending resolution. The response came faster than I expected. Patricia called me directly that evening, her tone clipped. "Mr. Dalton, I received a letter from your attorney. This is unnecessary escalation. You billed me $500 for a service I didn't authorize. You call that unnecessary? We followed procedure. Then prove it. Show me the tracking numbers for the certified mail." Silence. "Patricia, you didn't send those letters, did you? We sent them regular mail." "Your bylaws say certified mail for enforcement actions. I read them." More silence, longer this time. "Look," she finally said, "I'm willing to compromise. We'll reduce the invoice to just the cost of the lawn service, $200. No administrative fees, no fines. You pay that and we move on." "Why would I pay for something I didn't want and that you had no right to do?" "Because fighting this will cost you more in attorney fees than just paying the bill. That's extortion. That's reality. Don't be stupid, Marcus. Send me the tracking numbers or withdraw the invoice entirely. Those are your options." I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but this time it felt different. Not fear, but adrenaline. I was actually standing up to these people. David called the next morning. I heard from the HOA's attorney. They're claiming the notices were sent regular mail, not certified, and that the bylaws don't specifically require certified mail for enforcement. That's garbage. Section 12 says written notice, which in legal terms means verifiable delivery. You're right, but they're going to fight it. Here's what I think is happening. Patricia screwed up. She either forgot to send notices or assumed regular mail was fine. Now she's in too deep and can't back down without admitting fault. If she does that, she opens the HOA up to liability. So what happens now? They offered to reduce the invoice to $200, right? Yeah. That's them trying to cut losses. But if you want to fight this on principle, we can. I'll request a formal hearing with the HOA board. You'll present your case, they'll present theirs, and the board will vote. Isn't Patricia the board president? Yes, and that's a problem. She has influence over the other board members, but it's still your right to a hearing and it creates a record. If the hearing goes badly, you can sue in court. How much will that cost, court? Several thousand, maybe more. It depends on how long it drags out. I thought about it. $200 to make this go away or thousands to fight on principle. The smart financial move was obvious, but something in me rebelled against giving in to bullies. "Request the hearing," I said. David paused. "You sure?" "Yeah. They invaded my property. They need to know they can't just do whatever they want." "All right, I'll file the request today." The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, a Thursday evening at the community center. In the meantime, I got another email from the HOA. This one informed me that my trash bins had been left out past the designated time on collection day, violating Section 8, Paragraph 2 of the bylaws. A $50 fine was being assessed. I checked my calendar. I'd brought the bins in the same day, around 5 in the evening. The bylaws said they had to be brought in by end of day. I'd been in compliance. I took photos of my bins in the garage with timestamps and sent them to David with a note about the new harassment. he replied. "This is retaliation. Document everything. Don't engage directly." 2 days later, another email. My exterior house paint was fading and needed to be refreshed within 60 days per Section 4, Paragraph 9. I walked around my house taking photos. The paint was fine. A little sun faded in spots, but nothing that stood out. My neighbors' houses looked similar or worse. I sent those photos to David too. "They're building a case against you to justify harsher action," he said over the phone. "It's a common tactic. Make the homeowner look like a chronic violator so any punishment seems reasonable. What can I do?" What you're doing. Document everything. Respond to each claim in writing stating your compliance and refuting their allegations. And be ready for more. They're going to keep pushing. He was right. Over the next week, I got notices about my mailbox needing cleaning, my driveway having an oil stain, and my window blinds being non-compliant colors. Each one was petty, each one was arguably false, and each one came with a fine. I responded to all of them with photos and written rebuttals. My mailbox was clean. The driveway had a tiny stain from previous owners that had been there when I moved in. My blinds were white, a standard color that dozens of other houses had. The HOA rejected every rebuttal. By the time the hearing arrived, I was exhausted and angry. I'd spent hours compiling evidence, printing documents, and preparing my case. David helped me organize everything into a clear narrative. The community center was a bland beige building near the Meadowbrook Estates entrance. I arrived 15 minutes early to find Patricia already there, along with 4 other board members. 2 men and 2 women, all middle-aged, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Patricia sat at the center of a long table at the front of the room, flanked by the others. Name placards identified them as Richard, Susan, Tom, and Jennifer. I recognized Jennifer as my neighbor 3 houses down. Though we'd never spoken, David and I sat at a smaller table facing them. The setup felt like a trial. Patricia called the meeting to order at exactly 6 o'clock. She read through procedural rules in a monotone, then turned her attention to me. "Mr. Dalton, you requested this hearing to dispute charges related to lawn maintenance performed by the HOA on your property. Is that correct?" "Yes. Please present your case." David stood. "For the record, I'm David Chen, representing Mr. Dalton. We're here tonight because the HOA performed lawn services on my client's property without proper notice as required by your own bylaws. Section 12, Paragraph 4, clearly states that written notice must be provided before the HOA can arrange services and bill the homeowner. No such notice was properly delivered to Mr. Dalton." Patricia held up the printed letters. "We have copies of 3 notices sent to Mr. Dalton's address over a 3-week period." "Copies aren't proof of delivery," David countered. "Per Nevada law and standard HOA practice, enforcement notices must be sent via certified mail or another verifiable delivery method. The HOA bylaws reference written notice, which legally implies verifiable delivery. We have a statement from the post office confirming no certified mail was delivered to Mr. Dalton's address during the relevant period." I handed David the post office statement, and he passed it to Patricia. She barely glanced at it. "We sent the notices via regular mail. That satisfies the written notice requirement." "No, it doesn't. Regular mail provides no proof of delivery. For all we know, those letters were never sent at all." Patricia's face reddened. "Are you accusing us of fraud?" "I'm stating that you have no proof you sent notices, and without that proof, you violated your own procedures." Richard, one of the board members, leaned forward. He was a heavy-set man with gray hair and a skeptical expression. "Mr. Chen, Are you saying the HOA needs to send everything certified mail? That seems excessive. For enforcement actions that result in fines or charges, yes. That's standard practice in HOA management specifically to avoid situations like this. Susan, a thin woman with glasses, chimed in. But if we sent the letters and Mr. Dalton claims he didn't get them, how is that our fault? The Postal Service loses mail sometimes. David nodded. That's exactly why certified mail exists. It creates a record. If the HOA had sent certified mail and Mr. Dalton refused to claim it or it was returned, that would be on him. But there's no record of any mail at all. Because we sent it regular mail, Patricia snapped, which proves nothing. The back and forth continued for another 10 minutes. David was calm and methodical, citing specific bylaw sections and Nevada HOA statutes. Patricia got increasingly defensive, her voice rising. Finally, Tom, the fourth board member, spoke up. He was younger than the others, maybe mid-40s, with a reasonable demeanor. Can I ask Mr. Dalton a question directly? Patricia looked annoyed but nodded. Tom turned to me. Why were you letting your lawn grow so long in the first place? You had to know it would be an issue. I stood, grateful for a chance to explain. I was establishing a native plant lawn for pollinators. Bees, butterflies, and other beneficial insects are declining rapidly, and traditional grass lawns are ecological deserts. There are multiple native plant species that look like tall grass, but are actually flowering plants that support local ecosystems. I wasn't letting my lawn go from neglect. It was deliberate environmental stewardship. Jennifer, my neighbor, nodded slightly. I've read about those. They're supposed to be good for the environment. They are, I said. And they're becoming increasingly common in environmentally conscious communities. Some HOAs are even updating their rules to encourage them. Patricia cut in. This HOA hasn't updated those rules. And you didn't get approval from the Architectural Review Committee before making changes to your landscaping. I didn't change my landscaping. I just stopped mowing as frequently and let native plants establish. There's nothing in the bylaws that requires approval for choosing to mow less often. Section 3, Paragraph 7, Patricia said, flipping through her own copy of the bylaws. Any changes to the external appearance of a property require Architectural Review Committee approval. David stood again. Not mowing grass isn't a change. It's a choice about maintenance frequency. If the bylaws specify maximum grass height, which they do, then as long as Mr. Dalton stays under that height, he's in compliance. The issue here is whether he actually violated the height restriction, and if so, whether proper notice was given before enforcement action. His grass was clearly over 6 inches, Patricia said. You have measurements, David asked. Silence. Photos. We have testimony from neighbors who complained. Which neighbors? I asked. I'd gotten along fine with everyone I'd met. No one had said anything to me directly. Patricia shuffled papers. That's confidential. You can't use anonymous complaints as the sole basis for enforcement, David said. That opens the door to abuse. Anyone could make up a complaint about any property. The hearing went on for another 30 minutes. The board asked questions. David responded with legal arguments, and Patricia continued to insist the HOA had followed proper procedure. Finally, Patricia called for the board to deliberate. She asked David and me to step outside. We waited in the hallway for 20 minutes. I kept replaying the arguments in my head, trying to gauge which way it would go. David was checking his phone when the door opened. Jennifer beckoned us back in. Patricia had a smug expression that made my stomach sink. The board has voted, she announced. By a vote of 4-1, We find that the HOA followed appropriate procedures in addressing Mr. Dalton's lawn violation. The charges stand. Additionally, given Mr. Dalton's pattern of violations documented over the past 2 weeks, we are imposing an additional $200 fine for failure to maintain community standards. What? I stood up. That's insane. Every one of those violations was fabricated harassment. The board reviewed the documentation and found sufficient evidence of multiple violations. This hearing is concluded. David put a hand on my arm, keeping me from saying something I'd regret. For the record, we believe this decision is arbitrary and contradicts both your bylaws and Nevada law. We'll be pursuing further action. That's your right, Patricia said coldly. Good evening, gentlemen. Outside, I wanted to punch something. They didn't even consider the evidence. I know, David said. That was a kangaroo court. Patricia has those board members in her pocket. But this actually helps us. How? Now we have a record showing the HOA acted improperly despite clear evidence to the contrary. That makes our case stronger if we go to court. And there's one more thing I noticed. Jennifer voted against the others. How do you know? Patricia said 4-1. That means one board member disagreed. Given Jennifer's reaction when you talked about the environmental aspect, I'd bet it was her. That's significant. It means even within the HOA, there's recognition that Patricia is overreaching. So what now? Now we file suit. I'll draft a complaint alleging the HOA violated their own bylaws, failed to provide proper notice, and retaliated against you for exercising your rights. We'll ask the court to void all charges and fines and issue an injunction preventing further harassment. How long will that take? Months probably, maybe longer. These things move slowly. And how much? He hesitated. It's hard to say exactly. A few thousand at minimum, could be more if they fight hard. I thought about just paying the $700 in total charges they were now claiming. It would be so much easier. But I couldn't shake the feeling that giving in would just empower Patricia to do this to someone else, or to come after me again later. Do it, I said. File the lawsuit. David filed the complaint in Clark County District Court 3 days later. The HOA had 30 days to respond. In the meantime, the harassment continued. I got notices about my porch light being out even though it wasn't, about packages left on my doorstep too long even though I worked from home and brought them in immediately, about my garage door being left open even though I only opened it when coming or going. I documented everything, responding to each notice with photos and written rebuttals. Patricia rejected them all. The constant barrage was wearing me down. I dreaded checking my email or mailbox. I started having trouble sleeping, lying awake at night thinking about what ridiculous complaint would come next. Work suffered too. I missed deadlines, struggled to concentrate during video calls. My boss noticed and asked if everything was okay. I gave a vague answer about personal issues. A month after filing the lawsuit, I got a knock on my door. It was Jennifer, my neighbor from the HOA board. Hi, Marcus. Do you have a minute? I invited her in, curious but cautious. She sat on my couch, looking uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize for how that hearing went. I voted against the charges for what it's worth. I appreciate that. Patricia is out of control. She's always been strict, but this is different. She's obsessed with your case, brings it up at every meeting. I think she sees it as a personal challenge. Why are you telling me this? Jennifer hesitated. Because I don't think what she's doing is right, and I'm not the only one. Tom has expressed concerns privately. Susan and Richard just go along with whatever Patricia says because they don't want the drama. Can you help me? Testify about what's happening? I don't know. I'm worried about retaliation. Patricia can make life difficult for board members who disagree with her too. She's already making my life hell. Jennifer nodded. I know. Look, I can't promise anything, but I'll think about it. In the meantime, keep fighting. You're not wrong about any of this. After she left, I felt a small spark of hope. Having someone on the inside confirm that Patricia's behavior was abnormal validated everything I'd been feeling. The HOA's response to the lawsuit arrived 6 weeks after we filed. Their attorney argued that the HOA had broad discretion in enforcement, that I had violated multiple provisions of the bylaws, and that my lawsuit was frivolous. David scheduled a motion hearing to argue our case before a judge. That hearing was set for 2 months out. During that time, something interesting happened. I got an email from another homeowner in Meadowbrook Estates, a guy named Robert Torres. He'd heard about my dispute through neighborhood gossip and wanted to talk. We met at a coffee shop in Henderson. Robert was in his 50s, a contractor with rough hands and a straightforward manner. I went through something similar with Patricia 3 years ago, he told me. She claimed my work then violated the commercial vehicle restrictions and fined me $2,000 over 6 months. What happened? I couldn't afford to fight it. I paid the fines and started parking my van at a storage facility. Costs me $100 a month, but it was cheaper than dealing with the HOA. Did she send you proper notice? No idea. I didn't know to check that. I just assumed she could do whatever she wanted. You still have records, maybe. Why? Because if she did this to you too, it establishes a pattern. That helps my case. Robert rubbed his jaw. I'd have to dig through old files, and I don't know if I want to get involved. I've got enough stress. I understand. But if Patricia is abusing her power, she needs to be stopped. He thought about it, then nodded. I'll look for the records, no promises. I left the coffee shop feeling energized. If we could show the court that Patricia had a history of improper enforcement, it would undermine her credibility. Robert came through 2 weeks later with a box of documents. I took them to David, who reviewed everything carefully. This is good, he said. She hit him with multiple fines over trivial issues, same pattern as with you. And look at this. She claimed she sent him certified mail notices, but there's no tracking numbers in his files. Can we use this? Absolutely. I'll file a motion to add evidence of a pattern of improper enforcement. The judge might not allow it since it involves a different homeowner, but it's worth trying. The motion hearing finally arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October. The courtroom was mostly empty, just David and me on one side, the HOA's attorney on the other, and Patricia sitting in the gallery with her arms crossed. Judge Sandra Morrison was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. She listened to both sides present their arguments. David laid out our case methodically. No proper notice, selective enforcement, retaliatory fines, abuse of power. He presented the post office statement, my documentation of all the harassment, and requested permission to introduce Robert's case as evidence of a pattern. The HOA's attorney, a slick guy named Bradley Warren, argued that the HOA had followed its procedures, that all enforcement was justified, and that Robert's case was irrelevant to mine. Judge Morrison asked pointed questions of both sides. When she addressed Bradley, her skepticism was clear. Counsel, your client claims written notice was provided, but there's no proof of delivery. How do you respond to that, Your Honor? The bylaws require written notice, which was provided. Regular mail is sufficient. And if the plaintiff never received the mail, that's a postal service issue, not an HOA issue. So the HOA takes the position that it can claim to send notices without any proof, and that's sufficient for enforcement. Bradley hesitated. The HOA acted in good faith, Your Honor. Good faith requires reasonable evidence of delivery, counsel. I'm not seeing that here. My heart lifted. Judge Morrison continued. As for the additional fines imposed after Mr. Dalton disputed the initial charges, those appear retaliatory on their face. Counsel, can you explain why your client suddenly found multiple violations after Mr. Dalton exercised his right to challenge the HOA? The violations were legitimate, Your Honor. Mr. Dalton has shown a pattern of non-compliance. According to evidence he's presented, those violations were either minor or non-existent, and similar conditions exist at other properties that weren't cited. That suggests selective enforcement. Bradley had no good answer for that. Judge Morrison took a brief recess to review documents, then returned with her decision. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff on the primary claim. The HOA failed to provide adequate proof of proper notice before taking enforcement action. All charges and fines related to the lawn service are vacated. Additionally, I'm issuing a temporary injunction prohibiting the HOA from imposing any further fines against Mr. Dalton pending a full trial on his claims of harassment and retaliation. As for the motion to include evidence of similar conduct toward other homeowners, I'll allow it on a limited basis to establish pattern and practice. This case will proceed to trial. Any questions? Bradley stood. Your Honor, we request a continuance to prepare for the expanded scope. Denied. You've had ample time. Trial is set for January 15th. We're adjourned. I wanted to cheer. David kept his expression neutral until we were in the hallway, then he grinned. That went about as well as we could have hoped. The judge saw right through their arguments. What happens now? They'll probably try to settle. Patricia can't be happy about that ruling, and going to trial risks a bigger loss for the HOA. Expect a call in the next few days. He was right. 3 days later, Bradley Warren contacted David with a settlement offer. The HOA would dismiss all charges and fines and pay $3,000 toward my attorney fees in exchange for me dropping the lawsuit. David relayed the offer. It's not a bad deal. You'd walk away clean and they'd cover most of what you've paid me. What about Patricia? Does she face any consequences? Not directly, no. This would be a settlement between you and the HOA as an entity. Then no, I don't want money, I want accountability. Patricia needs to answer for what she's done. Marcus, going to trial is a risk. You could lose. You said yourself the judge saw through their case. In a preliminary hearing, yes, but trials are unpredictable. Juries can be swayed by emotions, technicalities, and even if you win, you might not get much more than what they are offering now. It's not about the money. David studied me for a moment. All right, I'll tell them no deal. Bradley called back 2 days later with an improved offer, $5,000 and a written apology from the HOA board. David presented it, but I declined again. I want to go to trial. As January approached, something unexpected happened. Another homeowner reached out, a woman named Carla Simmons. She'd been fined by the HOA for having a decorative garden gnome that Patricia claimed violated aesthetic standards. Then another, a man named Steve Feldman, who'd been cited for parking his boat in his driveway overnight while preparing for a fishing trip, even though the bylaws allowed boats for up to 48 hours. David was thrilled. This is huge. Multiple homeowners with similar stories of overreach and selective enforcement. We can paint a picture of systemic abuse. All three agreed to testify if needed. Patricia, meanwhile, seemed to be unraveling. I heard through Jennifer that board meetings had become contentious, with Tom openly questioning Patricia's decisions. Susan and Richard were wavering, uncomfortable with the negative attention the lawsuit was bringing. 2 weeks before trial, Patricia showed up at my house unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, looking haggard. Her makeup was overdone trying to cover exhaustion. "Marcus, we need to talk. My attorney told me not to speak with you directly. Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside, leaving the door cracked. "What do you want, Patricia?" "I want to end this. The lawsuit, the fighting, all of it. What will it take? For you to admit you were wrong and to stop abusing your power." Her expression hardened. "I've dedicated 5 years to this HOA, keeping this community beautiful and property values high. People like you, who don't care about anyone but themselves, make that job impossible. I care about the environment and my rights. That's not selfish. You're going to destroy this HOA. If you win in court, every homeowner will think they can ignore the rules. It'll be chaos. Or maybe the HOA will learn to follow its own rules and treat people fairly." "I followed the rules." "You didn't, Patricia. You know you didn't. You never sent those certified letters. You made up violations to harass me, and according to the people I've talked to, I'm not the first." Her face flushed red. "Those people are lying. They're jumping on your bandwagon because they want to excuse their own violations. Or they're telling the truth, and you've been running this HOA like your personal fiefdom. Get off your high horse, Marcus. You're not some hero. You're just a bitter divorced man with too much time on his hands looking for a fight." The comment about my divorce hit harder than I expected. "How do you know about that?" "I know everything about the people in my community. It's my job. It's your job to manage common areas and enforce reasonable rules, not to invade people's privacy and abuse your authority." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You think winning in court will solve anything. I'll make your life miserable. Every single day I'll find something wrong with your property. I'll fine you into bankruptcy. And when you finally give up and move, I'll make sure every potential buyer knows what a nightmare you were to deal with." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You should leave." Patricia turned and walked back to her car. I went inside shaking, immediately calling David to relay the conversation. "That was incredibly stupid of her," he said. "Threatening you directly right before trial. If she's willing to say that to your face, imagine what she might say on the witness stand if she gets emotional. This helps us." Trial began on a cold January morning. The courtroom was more crowded this time. Jennifer, Tom, Robert, Carla, Steve, and several other Meadowbrook Estates residents filled the gallery. Patricia sat with Bradley at the defendant's table, her expression rigid. Judge Morrison presided again. After jury selection and opening statements, David called me as the first witness. I testified about the lawn service, the lack of notice, the subsequent harassment, and Patricia's threatening visit. Bradley cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint me as a troublemaker who intentionally violated HOA rules. I stayed calm, sticking to facts. David called Robert next, then Carla, then Steve. Each told similar stories of Patricia's overreach, lack of proper notice, and selective enforcement. Bradley objected repeatedly, arguing the cases were irrelevant, but Judge Morrison allowed the testimony to establish a pattern. The testimony that really landed was Jennifer's. David called her as a hostile witness since she was still a board member. She looked terrified but answered honestly. "In your time on the HOA board, have you witnessed President Hendrickson enforce rules selectively?" Jennifer nodded. "Yes. She tends to focus on homeowners who question her authority or who she perceives as not fitting community standards." "Can you give an example?" "There was a family who rented out a room in their house. Patricia didn't like that they had a lot of visitors, said it looked bad. She cited them for multiple violations, things like parking infractions and noise complaints, even though other neighbors had similar situations and weren't cited." "Did President Hendrickson send proper notice before those citations?" I don't know. I only see the summaries at board meetings. Have you ever raised concerns about President Hendrickson's enforcement practices? Yes. During the meeting about Mr. Dalton's case, I expressed that we should dismiss the charges given the lack of proof of notice. I was outvoted. Bradley's cross-examination tried to undermine her testimony, but Jennifer held firm. On the third day of trial, David called Patricia to the stand. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. David started gently, walking through her background and role as HOA president. Patricia was composed, almost charming. Then he shifted. Mrs. Hendrickson, did you send certified mail notices to Mr. Dalton before arranging the lawn service? We sent written notices, which the bylaws require. That's not what I asked. Did you send certified mail? We sent notices via regular mail. Why not certified mail? It's expensive and unnecessary for routine matters. But this wasn't routine. You were about to charge Mr. Dalton hundreds of dollars and perform work on his property without his consent. That's significant action, isn't it? We have to maintain community standards. That doesn't answer my question. Did you consider that sending regular mail provides no proof of delivery? I assumed he received the letters. Based on what? Based on the fact that we sent them. You have no proof they were actually delivered. No. That admission hung in the air. David continued. Mrs. Hendrickson, in the 2 weeks after Mr. Dalton disputed the lawn charges, you cited him for multiple other violations. Correct. He was in violation of multiple provisions. But you didn't cite any of those violations before he disputed the lawn charges, did you? I noticed them during increased scrutiny of his property. Increased scrutiny because he challenged you. Increased scrutiny because he demonstrated a pattern of non-compliance. Or retaliation because he dared to question your authority, Bradley objected. Judge Morrison sustained it, but the point was made. David moved in for what I hoped would be the killing blow. Mrs. Hendrickson, did you visit Mr. Dalton's home on January 3rd of this year? Patricia's composure cracked slightly. Yes. What did you discuss? I tried to resolve the dispute. Did you tell him you would make his life miserable? I was expressing frustration. Did you say you would fine him into bankruptcy and ensure buyers knew he was a nightmare to deal with? Those words are taken out of context. What's the proper context for threatening to financially destroy someone for exercising their legal rights? Bradley objected loudly. Judge Morrison sustained it and instructed the jury to disregard the characterization, but the damage was done. Patricia's face was red, and she was visibly rattled. The trial lasted 5 days total. Closing arguments came on Friday afternoon. David laid out a clear narrative of abuse of power, lack of due process, and retaliation. Bradley tried to salvage things by arguing the HOA acted reasonably, and that any mistakes were procedural errors, not intentional wrongdoing. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict. In the matter of Dalton versus Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, we find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $8,000 and punitive damages in the amount of $25,000. I nearly fell out of my chair. $8,000 covered my attorney fees and the stress and time I'd lost. $25,000 was a message to the HOA that their conduct was unacceptable. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. Outside the courtroom, David was grinning. Punitive damages in an HOA case are rare. The jury really wanted to send a message. What happens now? The HOA will appeal, almost certainly, but appeals are expensive and they have to post a bond for the judgment amount. $33,000 is real money for a small HOA. They might decide to cut their losses. And Patricia, That's up to the HOA board and the homeowners, but I'd be surprised if she survives this politically." He was right. Within 2 weeks, I heard through Jennifer that an emergency meeting of Meadowbrook Estates homeowners had been called. The topic was a vote of no confidence in Patricia Hendrickson. I attended the meeting, which was packed. Dozens of homeowners showed up, many I'd never seen before. Tom chaired the meeting since Patricia had been temporarily suspended pending the vote. Homeowner after homeowner stood to speak. Most supported removing Patricia. Some defended her, arguing she'd kept the community nice and that I was a troublemaker who'd ruined things. But the tide was clearly against her. When Patricia herself was given a chance to speak, she stood and addressed the room with defiance. "I've served this community for 5 years without pay, sacrificing my time and energy to maintain our standards. Yes, I made mistakes in the Dalton case, but I was trying to protect your property values. If you vote me out, you're telling future board members that enforcing rules will get them punished. Good luck finding volunteers after that." It was a miscalculation. Instead of humility, she'd offered blame shifting and martyrdom. The room turned even more against her. The vote was called. By a margin of 73-18, Patricia was removed as HOA president and from the board entirely. Tom was elected interim president. One of his first acts was to settle my lawsuit, paying the judgment in full and issuing a formal apology on behalf of the HOA. We recognize that our enforcement actions against Mr. Dalton were improper and apologize for the stress and expense caused. The board is committed to reforming our procedures to ensure this never happens again. As part of those reforms, the board voted to update the bylaws requiring certified mail for all enforcement notices, and creating an ombudsman position to review complaints about board actions. They also adopted a native landscaping provision allowing homeowners to establish pollinator habitats with pre-approval based on clear criteria. I was the first to apply under the new provision. My meadow lawn was officially approved. Life slowly returned to normal. I finished the project I'd been neglecting at work. I slept through the night again. The constant dread of checking my email faded. One evening in late February, almost a year after this all started, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when Jennifer walked over. "Hey, Marcus. How's the lawn coming?" I gestured at the front yard, where green shoots were emerging as spring approached. "Good. Should be in full bloom by April. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm thinking about doing something similar in my backyard. I can give you some recommendations on native plants." "I'd appreciate that." She paused. "I wanted to thank you, by the way." "For what?" "For not backing down. A lot of people would have just paid the fines and moved on. You stood up for what was right even when it was hard. That matters." "I almost gave up a dozen times. But you didn't. And because of that, the HOA is better now. Tom's doing a good job. He actually listens to people. You played a part too. Testifying couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't. Patricia sent me nasty emails for weeks after. But it was the right thing to do." We talked for a while longer, then she headed home. I stayed on the porch as darkness fell, thinking about everything that had happened. It struck me that the story could have ended very differently. If I'd paid that first $200, Patricia would still be running the HOA unchecked. Other homeowners would still be living in fear of arbitrary enforcement. The precedent that bullying works would have been reinforced. Standing up had been expensive and stressful, but it had been worth it. Not just for me, but for everyone in Meadowbrook Estates. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected piece of mail. It was a handwritten note from Patricia. "Marcus, I've had time to reflect on everything that happened. I still believe I was trying to do the right thing, but I recognize my methods were flawed. I let my commitment to the community become an obsession with control. I'm sorry for the stress I caused you. I hope you enjoy your lawn. Patricia. It wasn't a full apology, still hedged with justifications, but it was something. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. I filed it with all the other documents from the case, a reminder of how things can go wrong when good intentions turn into unchecked power. Spring arrived, and my meadow lawn burst into color. Purple coneflowers, yellow black-eyed Susans, white yarrow, and dozens of other native plants created a tapestry that buzzed with bees and butterflies. Neighbors stopped to admire it. Some asked questions about creating their own. Kids played at the edges, fascinated by the insects. One Saturday morning, I was out front pulling weeds when a car pulled up. A woman got out, professionally dressed, carrying a tablet. "Mr. Dalton, I'm Rebecca Walsh with the Henderson Environmental Council. I heard about your native lawn and the lawsuit. I was hoping to talk to you about it." "Sure. What's this about?" "We're putting together a program to encourage native landscaping throughout the city. Your case has gotten some attention, and we think it could be a catalyst. Would you be willing to let us feature your lawn as a demonstration site?" "Really? Really? What you did, fighting for your right to create pollinator habitat, that resonates with people. And frankly, the fact that you won against an HOA sends a message that environmental stewardship doesn't have to conflict with homeownership." I agreed, and over the next few months, my lawn became a minor local attraction. The city featured it in a newsletter. A local news station did a piece on native landscaping and interviewed me. Other HOAs in the area started updating their rules to allow similar projects. The thing that gave me the most satisfaction, though, was watching my lawn thrive. The plants grew fuller and healthier. Bird species I'd never seen before showed up to feed on the seeds and insects. On warm evenings, I'd sit outside with a beer and watch the ecosystem I'd created pulse with life. It had all started with a simple desire to do something good for the environment, and turned into a year-long battle that tested my limits. But I'd come out the other side with something meaningful. Not just a victory against an overreaching HOA, but proof that standing up for what's right can create change beyond yourself. Tom and the new board continued to make improvements. They created better communication channels, held regular town halls, and made the budget transparent. Homeowner satisfaction increased. The community actually felt like a community again rather than a dictatorship. I occasionally saw Patricia around Henderson, usually at the grocery store or driving past. We never spoke. She'd moved to a different neighborhood, I heard, somewhere without an HOA. Life in Meadowbrook Estates settled into a comfortable rhythm. I made friends with neighbors I'd barely known before, bonding over our shared experience of HOA reform. Robert, Carla, Steve, and I became a regular group, meeting monthly for dinners where we'd share stories and laugh about the absurdity of what we'd been through. One evening that summer, as I was watering the meadow during a dry spell, a young couple walked by with a toddler. They stopped to look at the lawn. "This is beautiful," the woman said. "We just moved in down the street. Can you really have a lawn like this here?" "You can now," I said. "It took some work to get the rules changed, but the HOA approved native landscaping last year." We were worried about all the restrictions. The realtor made it sound like the HOA was really strict. It was, but it's better now. If you have questions or issues, talk to Tom, the president. He's reasonable. They thanked me and continued their walk. I watched them go, the toddler pointing excitedly at a butterfly. That's what it had all been for. Not just my right to have the lawn I wanted, but creating an environment where future homeowners wouldn't have to live in fear of petty tyrants. where reasonable people could make reasonable choices about their property without being harassed and threatened. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I sat on my porch and reflected on the journey. It had started with anger, watching strangers destroy my lawn without permission. It had evolved into a fight for principle, refusing to back down against bullying and overreach. And it had ended with meaningful change, not just for me but for an entire community. The lawsuit had cost me time, money, and stress. But it had also taught me something important. Systems of power, even small ones like homeowners associations, rely on people not fighting back. They count on the calculation that it's easier to just pay the fine, follow the unreasonable rule, accept the injustice. Most of the time, that calculation is right. The personal cost of fighting is high, but sometimes someone has to fight anyway. Not because it's easy or profitable, but because it's right. And when enough people make that choice, systems change. My phone buzzed with an email. It was from David Chen. "Hey Marcus, hope you're well. Wanted to let you know I've had 3 new clients in the past month with HOA disputes. All of them mentioned your case as inspiration for fighting back. Looks like you started something. Thanks for being a client who actually cared about more than just money. Made me remember why I got into law. Best, David." I smiled and put my phone away. The meadow rustled in the evening breeze, alive with the sounds of crickets and cicadas. Tomorrow I'd go to work, tackle some coding problems, live my quiet life. But I'd always have this reminder that ordinary people can make a difference when they refuse to accept wrong as inevitable. The lawn grew wilder and more beautiful as summer progressed, exactly as I'd hoped when I first stopped mowing all those months ago. And every time I looked at it, I felt satisfaction knowing I'd stood up for something that mattered. Not just native plants and pollinators, though those were important, but the principle that your home should be yours, that rules should be fair and enforced properly, and that no one, not even an HOA president, has the right to abuse power unchecked. It had been a long fight, exhausting and frustrating. But standing in my meadow on that summer evening, watching the last light fade as bats swooped overhead catching insects, I knew without question that it had been worth every minute.